On behalf of the Master's degree in Southeast European Studies, Politics, History and Economics, my name is Susanna Verney. I'm the current director of the programme, and today I'm talking with Professor Dimitris A. Sotiropoulos, one of our faculty members, about his new book, The Irregular Pendulum of Democracy, Populism, Clientelism and Corruption in the Yugoslav Successor States. Professor Sotiropoulos, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for this invitation to talk about my latest book.
What is the main argument of this book, and what does it tell us about the Western Balkans?
This is an argument about the failure of democracy in Western Balkans. There are many different approaches, not only regarding Southeastern Europe and the Western Balkans, but also other regions of the world. Indeed, comparative politics today dwells on the following question: why, after the year 2006 in particular, there has been reversal of the democratization process which had started in the last quarter of the previous century. And there have been many responses to these different arguments regarding this reversal of democratization. First of all, in terms of terms, we label the trend as backsliding of democracy or erosion of democracy. Secondly, there are different approaches which emphasize either structural variables or agency-related variables. The first approach says that we just have to look at economic decline or other structural variables related to the share of religious believers of this or that religion in a certain country in which democracy has not been successful. The other approach says no, structural variables will not tell us the whole story. We'll look better for solutions to the question why democratization has started going backwards by analyzing the profile and the roles played by actors. These are political actors such as elected leaders. They have been governing countries, including countries in the European Union, by being legitimately elected. Yet, upon their ascent to government, they start trimming democratic freedoms. They also start upsetting the balance among different democratic institutions, such as the checks and balances among the judiciary, the legislative, and the government. So my argument is that instead of choosing one or the other approach, we should look at the social context in which this reversal of democratization has been taking place. In my view, it is difficult to understand how structures by themselves, for example, an underdeveloped economy, would necessarily be associated with a reversal of democratization. Nor are we able to say that if a political leader X arises to power, then he or she will engineer the backsliding of democracy. So I suggested the following idea, that we should look at relations between state and society. These create a certain context, a context in which political life evolves. And looking at the region of Western Balkans, I suggested in my book that typical state-society relations are of three kinds. One is clientelism or patronage, and the other type of state-society relation is corruption. That, of course, concerns not the population as a whole. It concerns political leaders with selected circles of businessmen or with selected groups of society which are being corrupt by political leaders. And the third type of state-society relations is populism, where people are galvanized in a way that they understand politics to be an interplay between a leader, usually a charismatic one, and the masses, without any intermediation by political party organizations, trade unions, and the like. And I argue that these three types of state-society relations have been embedded in Western Balkans for a long time. For this reason, successive political elites which have governed the three countries of my study, Serbia, North Macedonia, and Montenegro, have been able to engineer a reversal of democratization exactly because populism, clientelism, and corruption in different degrees are the state-society relations which impede successful democratization. By contrast, this kind of state-society relations facilitates elected leaders who would like to strangle democratic freedoms or fully control democratic institutions in addition to the government. If there were other kinds of state-society relations, for example, the type of pluralist relations between state and society we find in some Anglo-Saxon countries, or if there were relations of social corporatism of the type we found in Central and North European countries after the end of the war, the Second World War, then I argue that political leaders would not be able to strangle democratic freedoms or to control democratic institutions in the way they have done in the Western Balkans.
Okay, so this is quite a provocative argument. What kind of criticisms have been made of the book, including what it says about the Western Balkans?
Thank you for this critical question. The truth is that many of the people who have read the book have told me that indeed we don't talk about democracies at all. That my three examples are cases of autocracies, which is another way to talk about authoritarian regimes. That democracy has not started being eroded. Democracy does not backslide nowadays in the Balkans because there was never enough of democracy, because democracy was never consolidated in the Balkans. To which criticism I respond that that is not exactly true. There has been a change of government in many different West Balkan countries. There have been social movements and parties of the opposition which have been able to upset regime-like governments, like, for instance, the regime of Djukanovic in Montenegro, or, my other example, the regime of Gruevski in North Macedonia between 2006 and 2017. If there has been a change of government, if, as I argue and we all know, there have been strong opposition parties, and if there are various kinds of social movements in these countries, then I would submit to you that we do have democracy, albeit possibly a deficient or, better said, unconsolidated democracy. And the other argument which is critical is the argument that says that structures outside these democracies of the Western Balkans, for example, the global economy or the European Union itself, have not facilitated democratization at all, and we need particularly to look at the troubled relationship between, on the one hand, the European Union and countries of the Balkans which have been on the road to becoming candidate member states or have acquired the status of a candidate member state. And this argument against my mostly domestically focused analysis says that we should look outside the boundaries of these countries for culprits for the failure of democracy. To which I argue that it is very difficult to convince the political elites and the electorate of countries which wish to become candidate member states to play by the playbook of the European Union, unless this is accomplished, unless domestic actors, political elites and the electorate, act in a way that would lead to improvement of democracy. The European Union itself cannot enforce democracy in any of these three countries.
So can you give us any hope for the future? On the basis of your book, can we develop some recommendations to improve democratic quality in the Western Balkans?
That is an even tougher question and goes against my training. I was specifically instructed by my professors never to talk about the future if I want to be a political scientist. Given this caveat, there is a possibility to look at how democratization has progressed in the Balkans, and this is a rare occasion, but indeed, if there is a set of civic associations, by which we mean civil society groups, coupled with a strong political party which dominates the opposition, then we have a front, a social and political front, composed of representatives of society and prospective governing elites, which can exert enough pressure on the violators of rule of law, by which I mean governing elites which have engineered a backsliding of democracy. Without such a dominant party in the opposition, it is very difficult to imagine that the fragmented or weak opposition would ever be able to affect democratic change. On the other hand, given that democracy means participation, without social groups such as social movements and trade unions and civic associations rallying around the cause of further democratization, again, we don't expect that a successful government turnover will take place. Even if it does, if there is not enough social support for true democratization from civic associations and other social groups, then we may fall back in the situation in which populism, clientelism, and corruption will gradually make the new governing elites behave in the old autocratic fashion.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Sotiropoulos. You've certainly given us a great deal to think about. And may I recommend to everybody that you read this very interesting book.
Thank you.